right, joining me now to rip through a really good-looking Week 8 college football board is our guy, Brad Powers. Before we get into all the games, make sure you hit that like button and that subscribe button right down there. Brad, how are you making out today?
I'm doing well. Look forward to this week's slate of games. It is a good week.
Okay, yeah, we got a real avalanche of games and best bets to get into. But first, if you missed Brad's appearance on Monday, he gave out Old Dominion plus 2.5. That's down to plus 1.5. And Purdue plus 4. That is down to plus 3. I'm guessing you're no longer interested in Purdue at that number, being on the key number of 3. Thoughts on Old Dominion at plus 1.5?
Yeah, Old Dominion still playable at 1.5. Purdue's still playable, but obviously decrease your bet size there. It's no longer best bet material at 3.
Okay, let's add some more best bets to the Week 8 board for us. So we have 3. Let's start with UL Monroe. They're a plus 6.5 point dog, and you like them to cover.
I do, and it's more of a fade against their opponent, Troy. Troy, if you've been following along, which I'm guessing most of you haven't followed Troy football closely, they have won back-to-back games, outright upsets in overtime. So it's a team, they've been playing well, but way above expectations. And now much different than winning games in the underdog role in overtime, catching your opponent by surprise, than now not only laying points, but laying points on the road against a desperate team in UL Monroe that lost as a road favorite last week. I like UL Monroe plus 6 here and wouldn't be surprised if they won the game outright.
Okay, next up, another underdog, Central Michigan. They are a plus 4.5 point dog, and you like them to cover.
Yeah, this is the time of year, Joe, you and I were talking before we came on the show. We're halfway through the college football season already. So the market's a little bit tighter, obviously, when it comes to numbers. So I'm looking more situational spots. And one of my favorite of the week is taking advantage of this one. Central Michigan plus 4.5. Central Michigan off a bye in this one. Critical because they're catching Bowling Green off of a big-time outright upset win over their arch rival where they rallied from 21 down. And on top of that, looks like Bowling Green's going to be playing with the backup quarterback again. I think Central Michigan's live here, but let's take them plus 4.5.
Okay, let's go 3 for 3 with underdogs. South Carolina plus 5.5. You like them to cover too.
Yeah, how about a game that more people are going to be more likely to watch? Yeah. So in the SEC here, South Carolina plus 5.5. If you look at South Carolina's schedule, they don't win this game. I don't think South Carolina is going to a bowl game. This was a preseason top 10 team in a lot of people's opinions. But more importantly, it's a fade against their opponent, Oklahoma. Yes, John Mateer is going to play, but he is completely compromised in not only one way, but 2 ways, in my opinion. Number one, he's playing with a broken hand on his throwing hand. Obviously, it impacted him last week against Texas, where he threw 3 picks and played his worst game. But on top of that, he uses his legs a lot, and they're less likely to run him, Oklahoma, because of that broken hand. So I just think the Oklahoma offense completely compromised against good South Carolina defense. Let's take the Gamecocks plus 5.5.
Okay, Brad, so there's some standout games on Thursday and Friday. I'm specifically going to ask you about Louisville, Miami, and North Carolina taking on California. Before we touch on those, is there anything else that stands out from a betting perspective?
Yeah, I like Minnesota plus 7.5, the home dog on a short week. Nebraska traveling back-to-back weeks. Also, there might be some distractions with Matt Rule being the favorite for the Penn State job. We'll see if that impacts Nebraska. Not by Nebraska. They had to rally to beat Maryland. The Michigan loss is not aging well. And then they had special teams and turnover luck against Michigan State. So Minnesota for me plus 7.5.
Okay, Louisville taking on the Hurricanes. Miami favored by 13.5, total 50.5. So first time all season, Louisville has been an underdog. High scoring history between these teams. The last 4 matchups have reached at least 69 combined points, including a modest 97 last season. How do you think this one goes down?
Yeah, 2 different teams this year, but I'm still going to lean over 50.5 here. You got an extra bye week for both to scheme up some things offensively. Miami hasn't kept the foot on the gas pedal here. It almost cost them against Florida State. So I think more likely we're going to see Miami continue to run their offense throughout the game here. So not a best bet, but a lean over 50.5 for me.
Okay, absolute clown show here for the Tar Heels and a late start for them at California here. California's favored by 10 points total on the lowest end, I guess, 47.5. Now, when UNC loses, they lose bad losses of 28, 25, and 34. Do they stand any chance of keeping this one close?
I don't think so, but I always defer to my power ratings. I've downgraded North Carolina significantly, but my power ratings are screaming that they should be the play here. I can't get to the window, though, with that being said on North Carolina because they've been non-competitive in the 3 games against Power 4 competition. What I do think is Belichick will be able to scheme something up against a true freshman quarterback. So I'm going to go under 47.5. Not buying anything North Carolina is doing offensively. So I think the most likely play here is under for me, but just a lean.
Okay, on to Saturday, let's start things off with a ranked matchup. Number 10, LSU taking on 17, Vanderbilt, who's favored by 2.5 on their home field, total 48.5. Now, LSU won last season's matchup 24-17. The Tigers are 5-1 to the under this season. What do you make of this matchup?
Yeah, you mentioned Vanderbilt being the favorite. Let me get some stats for you. This is the first time in 52 SEC games that Vanderbilt's favored in. This is the first time. Speaking of first time, it's the first time Vanderbilt's been favored over LSU since 1948. Last time they were favored over LSU. So, yes, I love Vanderbilt and what they've done, Diego Pavia, playing with a chip on their shoulder. But this is the first time they're really playing with expectations against a more talented roster. I'm leaning LSU here plus 2.5. Becomes best bet material if it gets to 3.
Okay, keep an eye on that one. Okay, next up we have Georgia Tech taking on Duke, who's favored by 1.5 at home, total 60.5. Yellow Jackets still undefeated on the season at 6-0. Duke 5-1 to the over. Both teams averaging over 32 points per game. Now, I knew you liked Georgia Tech earlier in the season. Do you like them in this matchup?
I don't. It's a bad spot for Georgia Tech. Duke coming off a bye. Duke better than the record indicated. They had a massive turnover, non-luck against Illinois earlier this season. A Duke team that was super impressive against Cal last time out. Outscored Cal 38-0 to close out that game. I thought I was going to be betting like best bet material Duke, but I was expecting a plus sign next to their name heading into this week. I think the market's all over this one with them being favored over an unbeaten team. I'm leaning Duke here, -1.5. Don't love the number though.
Okay, next up we have Michigan, who's coming off an ugly loss to USC. They're favored by 6 with a total of 50.5, taking on a scrappy Washington team who's beaten everyone except for Ohio State. You think Washington can give Michigan a game?
I do. And this would be best bet material for me, if not for the fact that it's 9 a.m. Pacific start time and a dreaded, West Coast to East Coast travel for Washington. But I think that in many aspects, Washington might be the better team. Yards per play margin better than Michigan. I don't like Michigan's current form with Sharon Moore as the head coach. You could argue that Michigan's 2 best performances this season were when Sharon Moore was suspended. They're very conservative on offense in the games that he's there calling. And you look at last week, I mean, they got their running back position banged up in Justice Haynes, one of the best running backs in the country. I know this is a circle the wagons type of game for Michigan, but I just think we got the better team here catching a touchdown. Washington +6 for me.
Okay, next up we have Texas Tech taking on Arizona State. Arizona State at home, a 7.5-point underdog, total 52.5. Now Texas Tech 5-1 ATS on the season. The only game that they didn't cover, and they were a 48.5-point favorite. Now they only won by 48 in that game, so they didn't cover that one by a hook. Do you think Texas Tech's spread success can continue?
This is a one-factor handicap. It all has to do with the health status of Arizona State starting quarterback Sam Leavitt. It's one of the more valuable players in all of college football. Indications are, especially with this line being 11 earlier in the week, is that he's going to play. So I hear you on Texas Tech. They're number 1 in the country in scoring margin, yards per game margin, yards per play margin, but they haven't played a tough slate, although the Utah road win looks pretty good for them. I'm going to lean with the over here because I do think Texas Tech's offense is the best that Arizona State's seen so far this season. And that was an Arizona State defense that struggled against Utah last week. And on the flip side, I do expect Arizona State with a healthy quarterback and Sam Leavitt to have some success against Texas Tech's defense. So I'm going to lean over here.
Okay, next up, good-looking ranked matchup. Number 5, Ole Miss taking on number 9, Georgia, who's favored by 7.5 at home, total 54.5. Now, Ole Miss still undefeated on the season, 6-0, and they did win last season's matchup, 28-10. What do you make of this, with it being outside of that key number of 7?
Yeah, you would think maybe I'd be on the dog here, but speaking of dogs, Georgia's probably a very motivated favorite because of what Mississippi did to him last year. They embarrassed Kirby Smart as one of his worst losses as a head coach, beating him by 18. So I think we get Georgia's best effort here. We better get Ole Miss's best effort because last week they were a 33-point favorite and only won a game by 3 against Washington State. So I expect better from them on both sides of the ball. Here's what I do like in the game. I like under 54.5. And I think there's just a big misperception in the marketplace. You think Lane Kiffin, you think over, you think offense. The reality is it's opposite of that. Last 27 games, if you blindly bet the under in every Ole Miss game, you're 18-9 to the under. So I'm going to go under 54.5. I'm fading a young quarterback making most hostile start in his career. Keep in mind, he was playing at Ferris State last year. Chambliss, the quarterback for Ole Miss.
Okay, next up, primetime Saturday night, number 11, Tennessee taking on number 6, Alabama, who's favored by 8.5 at home. Total 58.5. Now, both teams 5-1 outright record so far this season. Tennessee 5-1 to the over 65 combined points or more in all 6 Tennessee games. Do you think Alabama can keep rolling?
I do. I lean Alabama in this game. I am worried that it is the 4th straight game against a ranked opponent, and there are injuries starting to pile up for Alabama when you're playing that type of competition each week. So that's what's preventing it from being a best bet. But it's also kind of a fade against Tennessee. I don't like recent form for them. Barely got by Mississippi State in overtime and barely beat Arkansas last week. That's the 2 of the worst teams in the SEC. Now they're traveling to Tuscaloosa where they haven't won in 20 years. I lean Crimson Tide here. They're just the more proven commodity for me.
Okay, going head to head, primetime Saturday night. You're going to need at least 2 TVs. We have number 20 USC taking on 13 Notre Dame. Is favored by 9.5. Total on the highest end of 61.5. USC, great win last week against Michigan. Notre Dame pretty much destroying everybody after that 0-2 start. Is the hat you're wearing a little bit of a tell there, Brad?
No, I'm not on the side. Although when you speak tells, if you could, I think it's very important to be able to read an odd screen. And right now, there's a book in Vegas that's offering, if you want to bet SC10, and it's been up there all week, and they take the biggest limit. So that's not guaranteed that Notre Dame's the right side, but it is telling you that I would say if you're looking to bet SC, it's more likely this line goes up in the Notre Dame path. So don't be betting SC plus 9.5. Go ahead and bet them 10 or more. With that being said, I'm going to take USC's offense here. I like USC's team total over 25.5. They're going to have to score points to keep pace with this Notre Dame offense that's been rejuvenated. The matchup I specifically like is USC has a slot receiver by the name of Mekhi Lemon. He's the best slot receiver in the country against a Notre Dame defense that their weakness right now on that defense is they're starting a true freshman at nickel and Notre Dame in the bottom 10 when it comes to covering slot receivers. So I think SC's offense takes advantage of that. And USC is going to have to throw more than expected because their top 2 running backs are out. So USC team total over 25.5 for me.
Okay, some good nuggets from Brad there. Let's wrap things up. 23 Utah versus 15 BYU, who is a 3.5-point dog at home, a total of 49.5. Now, BYU undefeated on the season at 6-0, but this is the first time that they've been an underdog all season. They won a tight one, 22-21 last season versus Utah, who's 5-1 ATS on the season. So a lot of trends working for both teams here. Who do you think comes out on top?
I lean with the road favorite. Make sure if you're betting it, though, make sure you're laying 3. You might have to pay a little bit extra juice here, but shop around. I'm going to lean Utah -3. It's more of a play against a BYU team that really hasn't played anybody this year. Best opponent they played all year was last week against Arizona. And if you watched the game, many of you probably didn't. They're trailing Arizona by 10 in the 4th quarter. Kudos for them for rallying, forcing overtime, and winning it, but it was a very fortunate win for them. Meanwhile, Utah, with the exception of the Texas Tech game, has been crushing teams. You mentioned 5-1 against a number. Yeah, I mean, they've dominated every opponent they played so far, other than the Texas Tech game where turnovers were a major issue, and their quarterback was banged up in that game. So I like Utah here, the more proven commodity -3.
Okay, there you have it. An absolute avalanche of good-looking games here in Week 8. Brad, thanks as always for joining. Best of luck with all your bets, and we'll catch you again on Monday.
All right, thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, joining me now to break down a very exciting-looking week of college football action is our guy, former Michigan Wolverine and Denver Bronco, current analyst at the Big Ten Network, our guy, Jake Butt. Jake, how are you?
Well, I'm a little less proud to say I'm a former Michigan Wolverine after my alma mater got whopped by USC on the ground mainly last week. But a bounce back opportunity this week for them, and you'll have to check in. Ask me that exact question next week. Then I'll tell you how proud I am for sure.
Okay, indeed. Okay, yeah, we're going to get into the Michigan-Washington game. But first, let's take a look. Big picture. Ohio State really separating themselves at the top of the national championship futures odds board, coming in right around plus 330 odds. The next closest team, Alabama, in the plus 700 range. Which team do you think would give Ohio State the stiffest test?
It's probably themselves. Like at this point, it's probably, if they got injured or if maybe there is reason to be concerned with their offense. Right now, that's seems to be the major concern in Ohio State circles is, they're not as explosive as they might expect. But I think that's really just because the way of defenses have been playing them because of their talent on the outside. And they also have like the slowest pace of play. So I just want to throw in, I'll tell you my team here in a second, but I want to throw in one major reason why I'm so high on Ohio State. Right now, I think they have the second slowest pace of play in all of college football. And what that equates to over the course of a 16 plus game season, when you factor in the playoffs and conference title, their starters will have effectively played one fewer game on the season than their opponents because of how slow they play offensively in terms of a snaps per. So they are going to be fresh in terms of one fewer game at the end of the season. That really matters. That's like an additional bye week in the season. So I'm really, really high on the Buckeyes. That being said, I think Miami is the team best equipped to battle with them. And the reason why is I love Miami at the line of scrimmage. And I think if you're going to compete with the Buckeyes, one, you have to withstand what they present at the line of scrimmage. But two, you have to have the ability to maybe win that battle up front. I believe of all teams, it's Miami. I know you mentioned Alabama has the second best odds. We'll talk about it in a second. They really have no pass rush. Their defensive line does not scare me at all. And I think that would become extremely problematic against the Buckeyes. But, in a college football world where the slope is like kind of it's leveled out a little bit, there's a lot of parity. I think it's Ohio State, a gap, and then the slope starts now.
Okay, I don't often ask you about Friday night college football games that have double-digit spreads, but the North Carolina Tar Heels are in action. They've been in the news a little bit lately. You might have heard. So they're late start for them at California, who's favored by 10 points. What's your expectations for how the Tar Heels will look given the absolute clown show the past couple of weeks?
I mean, I really don't know. Like this almost feels like a Penn State situation, where it's just like the team just broke eventually. And these storylines, what's crazy to me, Joe, is Belichick was a master at managing media. He was a master at controlling the narrative. Storylines never penetrated the Patriots facility. And now it's like a dark cloud hanging over the North Carolina facility. And you got these young kids, 18 to 22 years old, especially vulnerable to reading all these headlines. It's just a complete and utter mess. And at some point, especially when you're losing and especially when your team's playing poorly, something's going to give, something's going to break, something's going to snap. So do I anticipate North Carolina is going to come out and suddenly play their best game of the season and play so far above themselves and win? No, I really don't. I really don't. I'd say it's much more likely that they fight hard for 6 or 7 minutes, and as soon as the game gets out of hand, they say, yeah, we've had enough of this. Our coach doesn't even love us anyway. He's using us as a pawn to compete with New England still. That's what I think is going to happen. But I mean, what a complete and utter mess. I'm seeing their GM the other day. He types with a typewriter. I'm like, what are we doing here? Time is of the essence. We got 20 hours with our players. Come on, we got to go. But I don't know. They don't have the talent. Honestly, we could just start there. They just don't even have the talent, period. Let alone the culture, let alone the game plan. It could get messy.
If you were TE1 for the Tar Heels, would you be looking to bounce?
Unless they wanted to give me like $1 million, unless they want to take whatever money they're spending and give it to me and promise me like 15 targets a game, yeah, I'm out of there.
Okay, yeah. Okay, pretty obvious one there, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let's check in on Michigan. Coming off a very ugly loss last week to USC, 31-13. You touched on it. They allowed 489 yards of offense, over 200 of those coming on the ground. So what are your biggest takeaways from that game? And what do they have to do to get back on track versus a scrappy Washington team this week?
My biggest takeaways is I suddenly don't know who Michigan even is. Like I could have handled a loss, and I wouldn't have been surprised if the headline Sunday morning read that Jane Mayava and Makai Lemon and Jacoby Lane and Lincoln Riley threw for 350 yards or 400 yards. But what I didn't expect to see was the headline say USC physically has their will against Michigan. USC dominates Michigan to the tune of nearly 230 yards on the ground with a third-string redshirt freshman running back. That's the part that's inexcusable. And then when I go back and watch the film, I say this defense looked completely lost, and they were exposed schematically in all three phases. And worst of all is in a weekend where I saw Indiana under Kurt Cignetti show up completely ready and dialed in to play in a hostile environment, the Michigan Wolverines were nowhere near mentally ready to compete in that game, in a game that they really needed. That was a proven opportunity. I thought it was going to be a great competitive game. They were nowhere near mentally ready. That's the concern. Now, here's what they need to do. Sharon Moore spoke to media this week. He said, listen, it was fundamental issues defensively. We didn't tackle well enough. There was a few schematic things that we didn't get to. That's on us, but it's all corrected. And who am I to say that that's not the case? But what I will say is if you do not show up this weekend and tackle well and have good pursuit lanes and don't have a good defensive game plan, Damon Williams of the Washington quarterback will absolutely expose you. I think he's the most dangerous quarterback they've faced all year. Yes, I know that they faced John Mateer, but he is by far the most mobile, quick, shifty, and slippery quarterback that they've seen. That is scary for a defense that is looking extremely shaky coming off the USC game. This is a must-win game for Washington and Michigan. That's what we have a ton of those games coming up these next 2 weeks. Washington's going to be bringing their A game because if they win this, you look at their next few games in the schedule, Washington is a dark horse playoff team. So Michigan better bring your A game.
Okay, some good-looking matchups this weekend between ranked teams. Let's rip through three of them. Let's start with Ole Miss taking on Georgia. Georgia favored by 7.5 on their home field. Ole Miss still undefeated. How much of a chance do you give them to stay undefeated in this big-time matchup?
Let's talk about it, and let's look at a few of the reasons why that I might like Ole Miss. One is UGA. That was an emotional game last weekend. They look sloppy, then they come back. Okay, great victory, but usually there's a chance of a hangover. Now, Ole Miss also had a sloppy victory against Washington State, but to me, that was more a product of clearly Ole Miss was caught looking ahead. Lane Kiffin was giving a ton of credit to his former buddy, Kirby Smart. So is there a risk of a hangover with Georgia? On the flip side, UGA, they've been plagued by slow starts this season. And we know Ole Miss likes to put up points. So maybe that's an angle. But here's the major concern. We have seen road home splits really be a major storyline in college football this year. For whatever reason, it seems like that is like the number one deciding factor in college football. Ole Miss has struggled away from their home field. They haven't won a ranked road matchup in the SEC since 2017. Obviously, Georgia had that long home winning streak before being snapped by Alabama earlier in the year. I love Georgia at home. I also love Georgia's ability to run the ball. Ole Miss's defense has looked extremely shaky and vulnerable. Right now, they rank 14th in the SEC in stopping the run, 94th nationally in run defense. That's a matchup that favors Georgia. Ole Miss, when they have the football, we know Lane Kiffin likes to push it down the field. Well, that's something that Kirby Smart's defense does not give up. So I see this game as Georgia being able to control the line of scrimmage, control the clock through the run game. And I just don't think that there's going to be any easy vertical explosive plays there to be had in the Georgia secondary. So I like Georgia to win, especially playing at home here.
Okay, next up we have Tennessee taking on Alabama, who is favored by 8.5. Now, I said it off the top of the show there. Alabama is second on the national championship futures odds board. Some people still kind of on the fence with them, though. How do you view this matchup, and is Bama officially back here?
Well, you win this one, and if they, I believe they're about an 8.5 point favorite in this one, so they're favored big. They're favored big. I mean, if you win this one big and cover, I mean, then that narrative is only going to grow. I mean, I love Alabama. Ty Simpson, he's one of the 1, 2, or 3 best quarterbacks in all of college football. Looks like a first round lock, if not a top 10, 15 pick lock this upcoming NFL draft. And Tennessee's secondary has been extremely shaky. I mean, they look lost back there. So it's a bad matchup. So then what could Tennessee do? If you approach this game and say, what could Tennessee do to make this game interesting? Well, Tennessee, I believe, leads the SEC in sacks. I like their defensive line. So usually one of the best things you can do when you're facing a quarterback that can push the ball down the field is you just don't give them a chance to push the ball down the field. You got to get to the quarterback, particularly away from the left side of Bama's offensive line. You got that guy, Caden Proctor, back there is a beast, a phenomenal athlete. So can they pass rush to the right side of the line and make Ty Simpson uncomfortable? That's one angle here. I think Tennessee also needs to break off some explosive runs. That's been a piece of Bama's defense that's been vulnerable. At times, they've been out of position. They haven't tackled well in the second or third level. They're 116th in the country in explosive runs allowed. So maybe that's a way to steal some momentum in this game. And maybe, the other angle would be is could Tennessee win a shootout, like a 49-42 game? That would require them to be playing nearly perfectly in this matchup offensively. I just don't see it. I really think this comes all the way back to Alabama and Kalen DeBoer ready to seize back momentum. And some of those narratives we talked about is, man, maybe Kalen isn't built to win in the SEC after that Florida State loss. Maybe he isn't built to take over from Nick Saban. I just think this is the week that Bama really just dominates. I just like a ton of their matchups against Tennessee, and all of a sudden we're saying, gosh darn it, Bama's got another great coach, and they're going to be here to stay for the next decade.
Okay, next up, USC. Relevant once again, at least looking like a semi-serious team here. They take on the Fighting Irish, Notre Dame at home, favored by 9.5 points. Now, they're on a roll, too, after the slow start they got off to. Do you think USC can stay competitive with them?
I do think USC could stay competitive, and it's a matter of like which Trojan team shows up. I'll tell you what, that was as much a story about how well USC played last week against Michigan as it was how poorly Michigan played. If that version of USC shows up, particularly at the line of scrimmage, I told you they dominated Michigan's line of scrimmage. I'm just completely shocked, still shocked. If that version shows up on the road, this game will get really, really interesting. But the same can be said for Notre Dame. I mean, which version of their defense shows up? I'll give Chris Ash credit. That defense has taken significant strides, especially in recent weeks. Which version of each team shows up? This is a big test for Lincoln Riley because he's struggled on the road. And really, this is a playoff game, especially for Notre Dame, already with the 2 losses. I mean, they're going to be ready, especially with their backs against the wall. I believe this is their last ranked opponent left on their schedule. So Notre Dame needs this win. And USC, really, they need this win, especially to shake off those cobwebs of losing on the road. So then when you get into the matchup, though, Joe, as soon as I said this about Chris Ash, you go back and look at his record as a defensive coordinator and a head coach against ranked opponents. They've allowed 35 points per game, and he has a 12-28 record. That's a little bit concerning for me. Mekhi Lemon, maybe he's a Biletnikoff favorite. He's one of the best receivers in all of college football. He plays in the slot. So Leonard Moore is not going to be able to match up with him. Notre Dame's slot grade, and they've been injured there, has been one of the worst in college football. Ooh. So if USC is going to win this, they're going to ride Mekhi Lemon to 200-plus yards. I should have looked it up. I wonder what his yards over and under are in this one.
That's where my mind went.
Yes, yeah, that's something to consider here because, it's something like 80-90% of his snaps out of the slot, and Notre Dame has been very, very shaky there. So I imagine USC wins or loses on the back of Mekhi Lemon.
Okay, yeah, a prop bet to look into. Let's get into a couple best bets for the week. Maybe a bit of an under the radar one here. Nebraska taking on Minnesota. Total is sitting there at 46.5. You like the over?
Yeah, I mean, in recent years, you would think, PJ Fleck, they like to play defense. Tony White under Nebraska before he moved on to Florida State likes to play defense. But we saw last week against Maryland that Nebraska is actually built to win shootouts. It's their defense that's looked shaky, particularly in conference play. And meanwhile, I just love the heart and inspiration of the way Nebraska's playing. They've been riding their offense to victory. So I see this game as getting into a little bit of a sloppy shootout. Drake Lindsey, Minnesota's quarterback, has been outstanding. They've struggled to run the ball. So I think both teams are going to ride their quarterbacks to a victory here. I can see this just completely turning into a shootout, especially on a Friday night, a short week, a quick turnaround for Nebraska. I'm really high on the Huskers right now. This is effectively a must win for them. And all of a sudden they're in playoff conversations. I'm riding this one to the over 46.5 points.
Okay, next up, maybe not a whole lot of people looking to back Penn State, but you are. I don't know, maybe a bit of a new coach bump. That's an angle that a lot of people buy into. They're a plus 2.5 point underdog taking on Iowa. You're going to take them on the money line here, plus 122.
I am. And the reason why is like if we just looked at the talent of these two teams, we would say, of course, we're buying we buy any day of the week of Penn State on the money line against Iowa. But here's the thing. What we saw with UCLA, new coach bump, right? Like this is something that we see you, especially when a team is mentally struggling and mentally giving up. That new coach, especially when they're positive, like Tim Skipper is with UCLA, like Neuheisel is their offensive coordinator with UCLA. That's exactly what I see with Terry Smith, the interim head coach of Penn State. He's recruited something like over half the Penn State roster. He's beloved by the players. And you ask yourself, what does Penn State still have to play for? Well, remember, this is a veteran roster that we loved. So all these guys, they're playing for their NFL future. And now they get the shift of going from they were playing clearly as a team under the most pressure and most mental weight of any team in college football this season. Well, now they get to shift to they have nothing to lose. What are they? They have nothing to lose. They're the underdogs against Iowa. So they can go out there and play free for the first time all season. And I'll throw in another nugget for you. Ethan Grunkenmeyer, their new quarterback. I've known this kid since middle school. All right. He came over to my house. We were throwing passes in the backyard. His mom was like, hey, I think my son is going to be a quarterback recruit one day. And I'm like, yeah, every mom says that. Right. And then as the years go on, I'm like, man, this guy's a 3-star. And then he's climbing to a 4-star. Oh my God, he's going to Penn State. This kid has the juice. And I think the team's going to buy in and lean into that suddenly newfound freedom. I like Penn State to win.
Okay, Jake, before we let you go, I want to get your thoughts on one of the stories of the week in the NFL. It is Tua and the Miami Dolphins, and Tua kind of throwing his teammates, well, not kind of, really throwing his teammates under the bus. They lose a last-second game to the Chargers. Last week, Tua threw 3 interceptions in the game, and in the press conference after the game, he said, the team has an issue with leadership, people not showing up to meetings. And my mind immediately goes to, well, dude, isn't that on you? You got the C on the jersey. You're the highest paid guy on the team. You are the quarterback. Now, he did come out on Wednesday and said he was wrong, and he did apologize, but maybe some hard feelings will remain here for his Dolphins teammates. So as a former player, how pissed would you have been about what Tua said?
I wouldn't have been pissed at all unless I was the guy, unless I was the one that showed up late, unless that it was 5 guys or 10 guys that showed up late. Or I would have been pissed if Tua was the one showing up late or had been showing up late to other meetings. That would be, I thought he was wrong to apologize. I think he was completely fair to call out his team and be like, guys, this is the NFL. We're in the middle of October. Are you already giving up on the season? That is like the fundamental level of respect is to show up on time for your team in the NFL, especially when it's a player-led meeting. Guys like, hey, we got to come together and figure out who we want to be. Our coaches on the hot seat. Our jobs, therefore, are all on the hot seat. Can we show up and try to come together as a team? And I understand the performance by Tua last weekend. Maybe that's a reason he apologized. He felt guilty not playing his best game. But to me, the only reason you get upset is if you're one of the guys that has been showing up late, or if you're one of the guys that's already checked out and thinks this whole thing is silly. I've been a part of that in Denver where there was player-led meetings, and I was injured at the time, and I'd still go to the meetings, and guys were just laughing and not taking it serious. And at that point, maybe you shouldn't have player-led meetings. Maybe you should let this thing crash and burn so you can learn quickly who to cut and who to move on from. But for me, I always wanted to fight and make a team. And that seems like what Tua's doing right now is he's still trying to fight for his guys. At least he's saying, guys, can we just show up early? And he didn't name any names. He's just saying, can we just show up on time, not even early, to these meetings? I thought he was completely in line as the leader of the team. But clearly there's a culture issue right now. Clearly that's the big takeaway. Everybody's checked out. I'm sorry, Joe. I know you're a Dolphins fan, but this can be a long rest of the season.
This is how we want the season to go. We need a reset. We want an early draft pick, but I do like your perspective. There is a lack of accountability and a lack of professionalism with these professional athletes. It's not necessarily to his job to be making sure these guys are getting out of bed on time. You know what I mean? So
we're paying you what, a few million a year to show up on time? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, absolute disaster in Miami for the Dolphins, but
Fortunately.
this is what we need for a reset. Okay, Jake, we will leave it at that for today. Thank you as always for joining. Enjoy all the games this weekend, and we'll catch up with you again next week.
Thanks, Joe. Good to see you.